Imagine yourself enveloped in the mists of an almost tangible silence where shadows seem to live and breathe. Shadows of Silence, Paranormal Encounters in the Countryside is not just a collection of stories, it's an invitation to cross the thin line between reality and mystery. In this documentary, we unveil the most closely guarded secrets of remote areas, places where the past does not rest, and every echo could be a whisper from beyond. Prepare to be transported to a world where fear merges with fascination, exploring accounts so real and intense that even skeptics might feel a shiver of doubt. Are you ready to challenge the darkness and discover what hides in the shadows of silence? Paranormal Experience at a secluded farmstead. Picture yourself in an isolated farmhouse, the perfect spot for escaping urban chaos, right? That's exactly what one skeptical man thought when he accepted his friend's invitation to spend a weekend deep in rural America, areas infamous for chilling horror tales and supernatural sightings. However, what started as a relaxing getaway quickly turned into an encounter with phenomena that would shake anyone's skepticism. As darkness fell, the woods surrounding the farmhouse seemed to come alive. Strange whispers echoed between the trees, and household objects moved inexplicably from their places. He tried desperately to rationalize these occurrences, perhaps the wind, maybe nocturnal animals, but deep down, an unsettling feeling of horror began to settle in, fed by the creeping fear that something far darker was watching. By daylight, he did his best to shake off his unease by exploring the property. But even in broad daylight, the unsettling sensation of unseen eyes following his every move persisted. No matter how hard he tried to dismiss the fear creeping into his heart, it was impossible to ignore the primal instinct warning him of imminent danger. As the days passed, strange incidents escalated his paranoia. A book he'd left on the coffee table appeared mysteriously on the floor, opened to a chapter detailing local legends of spirits, blood rituals, and vengeful curses. He wasn't superstitious, but even he couldn't shake the chill running down his spine as he read each terrifying line. At this point, he questioned his decision to visit the farmstead. Nature, which initially seemed peaceful, now felt dangerously alive, full of hidden threats. Every shadow and gust of wind seemed to whisper dark invitations, challenging him to unravel secrets perhaps better left untouched. Nighttime investigations and a mysterious warning. At a particularly quiet night, the distant rustling in the bushes caught his attention. Armed with nothing but a flashlight, he decided to investigate the source of the sound that disturbed the silence. As he cautiously advanced, each step seemed to amplify his own fear, and the weak light of the flashlight only added to the suspense, revealing more shadows than certainties. Fearing the investigation, the atmosphere became even more oppressive. The silence was so dense that he could almost hear his own heart beating. Despite the fear, he continued, driven by the need to understand what or who might be causing such disturbances. This search led him to a clearing where, for a moment, the moonlight revealed footprints that seemed neither human nor of any recognizable animal. A few days later, while visiting the nearby small town, he casually mentioned his nights at the farmstead. An old local, upon hearing his story, gave him an intense look and said only, "Be careful." Those words, though simple, carried a weight of warning he could not ignore. It was as if the very wind had silenced to hear what was to come. He returned to the farmstead with a feeling of unease he couldn't shake. Those words, "Be careful," echoed in his mind, mixed with the sound of branches breaking under his feet as he walked through the property. Each whisper of the wind seemed to bring with it a warning, and he no longer knew how to distinguish between paranoia and intuition. That night, as he prepared for another round with his flashlight, he wondered about the true nature of fear. It wasn't just the fear of the unknown, but the terror of something deeper, more ancient. And as the darkness deepened around him, he knew he was about to face something he might not be ready to confront. The tension increased as he awaited the complete fall of night. What had started as a simple investigation now seemed like a deliberate descent into the unknown. But despite the sensation of imminent danger, there was a part of him that couldn't help but feel a strange attraction to the unfolding mystery. This impulse would lead him to an even more restless night, filled with knocks and whispers that promised to reveal more than perhaps he wanted to know. Knocking at a door and a dark voice. It was a darker night than usual when the sound of light knocking began to echo at the front door of the farmstead. At first, he thought it might be the wind or some curious animal, but the persistent rhythm of the knocks suggested something else. Holding his breath, he slowly approached the door, the flashlight trembling in his hands. Through the silence that followed, a female voice began to whisper from the other side of the aged wood. "Let me in," she pleaded, with a tone that oscillated between supplication and seduction. It was a voice that carried centuries of pain and despair, and he, paralyzed by fear, struggled internally between reason and the terror that the voice inspired in him. "Hey, stepped back," the voice continuing to plead, becoming more insistent. The knocking at the door intensified, as if something or someone was trying to force their way in. However, there was something about that voice that seemed familiar, almost comforting, which only added a layer of horror to the situation. "Why are you afraid?" the voice questioned, as if it could sense his hesitation. With his heart pounding uncontrollably, he weighed his options. The idea of opening the door was terrifying, but the curiosity and fascination with the supernatural that had brought him here were almost irresistible. "What do you want from me?" he finally spoke, his voice barely more than a whisper. The response came as a chilling cold through the crack of the door. "Freedom," the voice replied, and then, as suddenly as it had begun, the sound ceased. The calm that followed was almost more disturbing than the pleas and knocking. He knew that the silence did not mean safety, but rather the prelude to something even darker. Reflecting on what to do next, he could not ignore the feeling that each decision he made led him deeper into a mystery that was both an invitation and a threat. The night was not over yet, and the true confrontation with whatever inhabited the farmstead was just beginning. Discovery of a dark past. Determined to understand the mysterious events, he went to the nearest small town to the farmstead to seek information. Talking to the locals, he learned about the intriguing history of the region, which seemed to hide more than just ancient legends. A visit to the local library revealed records of a family that, centuries ago, had practiced strange and possibly nefarious rituals. From among the dusty pages of an old book, he discovered that the farmstead had been a place of secret meetings for these rituals. Stories of sacrifices and pacts with unknown entities stained the history of that land. Blood, the account said, had been spilled on that soil, and with it, a curse that would last forever. With each new detail uncovered, he felt the weight of the reality of those stories. They were not just tales to scare children. They were evidence of a past that refused to stay buried. The horror of these revelations made it clear that what he was facing was not just the result of an active imagination, but something much more real and dangerous. This discovery made him reflect on the nature of fear and human curiosity. Why are we drawn to the macabre, to the mysterious, even when we know it could be dangerous? He found himself compelled to continue the investigation, despite the growing fear of what he might find. Talking more with the older residents of the town, he realized there was a reluctance to talk about the farmstead. "It's better to leave some stones where they are," warned an elder, his eyes conveying a mix of fear and resignation. But this warning only served to stoke his determination to discover the truth. Armed with the knowledge of the farmstead's dark past, he returned to face whatever awaited him. With each step back to those cursed lands, he knew he was approaching an inevitable confrontation. The night was approaching, and with it, the promise of finally reaching answers. Final showdown with the entity. Deciding to face the entity haunting the farmstead head-on, he spent that last night gearing up for the ultimate showdown. As darkness closed in all around him, the air practically buzzed with electric anticipation. He armed himself with salt and sacred symbols he jotted down from that old library book, hoping they'd be enough to keep the evil at bay. As midnight crept closer, the sounds around him started cranking up. The wind hissed through the trees like it was loaded with ghostly whispers. And then, the voice he'd been dreading boomed back, this time louder and demanding. "Open the door," it commanded, no longer begging but ordering with an authority that sent shivers down his spine. Not willing to let fear call the shots, he squared up to the voice, challenging its very presence and purpose. The reply came as a nearly tangible pressure against the door, as if some massive force was trying to bust through the barrier. Every knock made the wood creak and groan, testing its limits and his resolve. In that moment, He realized this battle wasn't just physical, it was spiritual too. Remembering the old rituals he'd read about, he started reciting power words, hoping they'd have some effect on the entity. As he spoke, a faint glow began to emanate from the sacred symbols, a small beacon of hope amid the terror. Then, out of nowhere, a blood-curdling scream tore through the night, freezing him in pure horror. It was a sound that seemed to come straight from the earth's depths, heavy with pain and rage. For a split second, everything stopped, and the pressure on the door eased. He knew that this brief pause might be his only chance to act. Fueled by courage and armed with ancient wisdom, he braced himself for what might be his final encounter. Knowing the entity would keep pushing to get in, he planned to use everything he'd learned to finally break the curse imprisoning both the farmstead and himself. The night still had more in store, but he was ready for whatever came next. The truth and lasting fear. After that harrowing night, he decided there was no way he could stick around at the farmstead any longer. At the first light of dawn, he packed up and left, leaving behind the darkness and secrets of that cursed place. The drive home never felt so long, and with every mile, he couldn't shake the uneasy feeling that something was still tailing him. Back in the city, life tried to get back on track, but nothing was ever the same for him. Night after night, nightmares of that voice and the events of that fateful evening haunted his sleep. Even amidst the hustle and bustle of city life, he often felt like unseen eyes were always on him, as if someone or something was constantly watching from another realm. That deep-seated fear had made itself a permanent part of him. He threw himself into researching paranormal phenomena and stories that echoed his own experience, trying to find some meaning or solution. Every new account he read confirmed the harsh reality of his ordeal and reminded him that some doors, once opened, can never be fully closed again. Through his investigations, he learned that the farmstead was located in an area notorious for its intense supernatural energy. He picked up various protective rituals and started practicing them, hoping to keep the evil at arm's length. Those rituals soon became part of his daily routine, a small comfort against the constant terror that seemed to shadow him wherever he went. He even joined support groups with folks who had been through similar paranormal encounters. Sharing his story and listening to others gave him a sense of solidarity, proof that while horror can touch anyone, facing it head-on can bring people together. Even as he continued his life, the shadow of that night never fully left him. The realization that real terror can lurk around every corner turned his life into a continuous journey of vigilance and preparation. No matter how hard he tried to move on, the truth of his experience was a constant reminder that once fear awakens, it sticks around for good. So, after diving into the mysteries that Shadows of Silence, Paranormal Encounters in the Countryside laid bare, how do you feel? Are you more skeptical now? Or is your mind wide open to possibilities that defy everyday logic? Every story we share is an invitation to look beyond what you see, to question everything, and maybe even to explore the unknown. Don't let fear of the dark hold you back from uncovering your own truths. Do you have what it takes to probe the shadows in your own life? And remember, the world is vast and ancient, full of secrets just waiting to be discovered. Subscribe to our channel and hit that notification bell to keep this wild ride going, because the next tale might just blow your mind. Ready to unravel more mysteries?